I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Kurosawa. And this week we are looking at the film Kikujiro, directed by Takashi or Takeshi Kitano, one of the best road movies of all time, a sweet, heartwarming kind of summer movie from one of the most interesting actor-director combos coming out of Asian cinema. But if you're new to this series, what I do every single week is cover a different Asian movie, review it, but also pick a different movie by a different filmmaker every single week. We're never repeating filmmakers because what we want to do with this series is to show you that there's more than Kurosawa, more than Bong Joon-ho or Miyazaki or some of the amazing filmmakers that you maybe have heard of, but there's a whole wide world of Asian cinema. We're covering a great director every single week and one of his best movies. We've been having a lot of fun with the series so far, doing movies from a bunch of different Asian countries, mostly of East Asian. We haven't really kind of jumped into, and probably won't jump into, other different cultures in terms of like Middle East or Indian or Pakistan kind of films. I think that's maybe another series. Really just want to dive into the kind of East Asian experience. And I do think that, there's plenty of filmmakers. We've been covering them now for multiple weeks, showcasing many different great movies, like I mentioned, in different countries, but also different genres or mediums in the case of, say, like animation, like we covered on last week. And what I wanted to kind of do this week is the same structure as what we've always been doing. The first half, discuss why I wanted to choose and discuss Takeshi Kitano, and the second half, just discuss the movie and give my overall thoughts and why I think it's a great one to start with if you haven't heard of the filmmaker and you want to learn a little bit more. But the reason why I ended up choosing Takeshi Kitano to cover is because it's a certain type of filmmaker, in that we've covered actor-directors before, but I don't think anyone like Takeshi Kitano. And I think also when we're understanding Asian cinema, it helps to kind of, I think, correlate it to what a lot of us here watching this video know the most, which is kind of mainstream Hollywood Western cinema. And there's all these different types, right? There's the auteur, there's the journeyman, there's the kind of actor-director. And I wanted to cover that and see the kind of parallel in the East. And we have covered one actor-director in the case of Stephen Chow, who's a kind of consummate filmmaker, and that he directs his movies, he also stars in them. But even in his more recent movies, he hasn't really appeared as an actor, kind of soloing himself more to being a director. Whereas someone like Kitano is more like a Clint Eastwood, in that he stars in his own movies, but he stars in his own movies even up until his older age. And if I were to compare him to anybody, he would be Clint Eastwood. He is kind of the Japanese Clint Eastwood in a lot of parallels. Of course, being the kind of actor, filmmaker, starring in a lot of the movies that he directs, but also will, direct movies without him, and then also will appear as an actor in movies that he's not directing. So he does kind of individually do both of them. But when you think of someone like Clint Eastwood, you think of a movie like Unforgiven, which it's both actor and director Clint Eastwood, in the same way I think of, for Takeshi Kitano, especially for Western audiences, they think of things like Fireworks or Hanabi or Sonatine or some of the kind of critical, most influential festival type movies that he did, where he was also the star and the director. And like Clint Eastwood, he has a similar kind of a stoic persona as an actor. Doesn't say a lot, can say a lot though with his face. Looks like kind of a tough guy who's been weathered by life. Even in his younger years, he looked like that. Very interesting face. And I think one of the best parts of Kitano as a filmmaker is that he has Kitano as an actor. And then also, I think, like Clint Eastwood, he has a wide-ranging filmography that's kind of tough to wrap your arms around. So in the same way I haven't seen every Clint Eastwood movie, I haven't seen every Takeshi Kitano movie. So I'm not an absolute expert on his films, but I have seen a number of them now, and I still thought it was an interesting filmmaker to discuss because I wanted to kind of showcase that parallel that, yes, there's auteurs from Asian cinema, but there's also journeymen, there's also kind of those actor-directors, and they have their own kind of a spin. And, with Kevin Costner, releasing his Horizon series, we still see these kind of big, ambitious projects from actor-directors, and there's something interesting to them always. And I think that this is the case here with Kitano as well. So I want to talk about him in two ways. The first is him as an actor, and the second is him as a director, because they're both really great. He's been in great movies just as an actor, but he's also made great movies just as a director. So I do want to kind of separate those two elements, even though they are still very much entwined when you're watching a Kitano movie, just because he appears in so many of them. But him as an actor, like I mentioned, has that kind of tough guy persona. I want to say he has a limited range, but that feels almost a little bit insulting to the acting style. But the best way I think you can describe him as an actor is he's got a limited range. He knows what he does best, but he actually shows the subtleties within that range. That being said, for the most part, you're going to be seeing him pretty stoic, not saying a lot, not doing a lot necessarily, pretty kind of a bland face. It's either that mode, relaxed, calm, or super angry. Those are the kind of registers that he's best played in. But what I think he's great at, and Kitano as a filmmaker also helps the acting part here, is that he plays to his strengths. And he can really showcase a lot of different emotions within that kind of a range. In the case of Violent Cop, kind of a little bit more haunted. In the case of Outrage, maybe a little bit step behind, a little bit frustrated. In the case of Hanabi, I would say more melancholic and sad. In the case of something like Kikujiro, maybe much more lovable. And humorous. So you can do the tough guy thing and undercut that for comedy, but you can also kind of lean into that and make that part of the kind of haunted, tragic part of his character and his story. And then just the most basic element of him as an actor, just being his face, is very interesting. He's got this kind of movie star charisma. He is such an interesting kind of person to look at, and he's able to kind of capture your gaze and make you interested in him just in the way he moves and the way he kind of even blinks. He is just a really interesting looking guy, combined with kind of movie star charisma, combined with the fact that he's directing a lot of his movies. He knows how to play his strengths and what his range is and how to play within that range. That being said, when we're talking about, directors and actors, when I go see a Tom Cruise movie, I kind of want to see Tom Cruise. In the same way, Kitano, when I see his movie, I kind of want to see his persona, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. He is a movie star, and sometimes we just like those people and like to see them in different types of movies. I think that's definitely the case here with Kitano. But what about him as a director? Well, the two kind of primary themes that he's consistently interested in throughout his movies are crime and love. And most of the time, kind of Yakuza type movies, cops and criminals, but always some sort of love story or emotional connection somewhere within the story, or even say a connection of friendship in, this week's movie, Kikujiro. But what makes him, I think, special is his ability to capture what I would call a lackadaisical tone, a languid tone, a melancholic tone, but without the sadness. A lot of people kind of refer to it as deadpan, and that's what makes his movies, I think, unique, and particularly his. He doesn't do a lot in terms of moving the camera or visualistic sensibilities. It's more so the kind of overall speed of the editing, the speed of the dialogue, and the characters that are on screen. Never too emotional. I mentioned he makes movies about love and crime, but the crime isn't like an action Michael Bay movie, and the love isn't like a Nicholas Sparks romance. It is relatively subdued, and I think he is the prime example of a director in which you can't judge his movies halfway through. You can't start giving it a letterbox review halfway through. You have to wait for the movie to end and to have it kind of sit with you, because the emotional beats are kind of slowly doled out throughout the movie. So as a result of this kind of languid or lackadaisical pacing and overall tone and feeling of his movies, the emotions don't necessarily hit you until the end of the movie, whether that be kind of the humor or the sweetness or the kind of tragedy or whatever situation. Because it's so kind of slow and subtle and reserved, it's feeding you these feelings out throughout the way so that those emotions don't kind of register with you or hit you until maybe the movie ends or the credits roll, and give you, like I've mentioned in past episodes, just a different way of experiencing emotions that are necessarily what you've maybe been traditionally set up to, where you know at the beginning of the movie what the movie is and you're waiting for it to get to the end and you know when the emotional beat's supposed to happen. Here, it's a lot more kind of roaming. It's more interested in that unified piece of how 10 small events in a row make you feel one thing instead of one big event at a time. So what makes him special is first, that persona that he has, that movie star charm that he's able to bring to so many of his movies. And then two, that kind of languid tone that means the emotions don't necessarily hit you until the film ends and gives his movies a unique kind of emotional registry as a viewer. But speaking of the film now that we're going to be covering, Kikujiro, it's about, if you don't know, a young boy who is off in summer vacation, no school, living with his grandmother, and wants to see his mom, who he doesn't know too much about. So his old neighbor's boyfriend goes with him, and it's a road trip movie for them trying to find his mother and kind of reunite them after a long period and kind of see what she's up to. And these are some of my favorite types of movies. I love road movies and I love all-in-one-night movies. And this movie, you can say it's similar to, speaking of Clint Eastwood, his movie A Perfect World, or Little Miss Sunshine, or The Fundamentals of Caring, that Paul Rudd, Selena Gomez movie. These kinds of road trip type movies where there's emotional conflicts and you grow, the characters kind of grow to love each other, and there's emotional reawakenings and all that kind of stuff you know from a road trip movie, I think is the case here. And sometimes when we talk about Asian movies versus Western movies, they're just a completely different genre. Like in last week, we talked about Takahata making movies for adults and children, but completely different than, a Pixar movie. But what I kind of liked about Kikujiro is that if this starred, it came out recently and starred Jason Momoa and, some young kid, some newcomer, and it came out on Netflix, I'd watch it and probably enjoy it. So I wanted to kind of showcase a movie here that I think is easily accessible to a Western audience and could have easily been made in the Hollywood system because it follows that structure of a road movie so well. But of course, making a great road movie is sneakily difficult because it's very easy just to seem, I think, treacly or sentimental. And because it's such a well-trodden genre, it's hard to make something different and unique. And I think what Kitano does as a director is make the movie feel like the world is stopping. That's what I always kept on thinking of when I was watching the movie, is that there's never kind of constant consequences or things that you have to go to. It's very much like a road trip going from one scene to another with the ultimate goal of getting somewhere and then getting back. But throughout the way, the kind of route to get there isn't necessarily linear. And as a result, the movie can feel like play. Not like a play, like theater, but like play in the sense of children playing, or in the sense of there are no rules, that time is stopped, like a long summer night. The movie often plays like a memory too, in that we have these small moments of waiting for a bus and it feels like the day kind of goes on forever. I think Kitano uses kind of montage very well in those sequences. But then there's also some more serious consequences of things like beating up a child molester. But what's continued throughout is this sense of limited consequences, or overall things are going to be fine in the end. It's not a very stressful movie. It's actually kind of a very relaxing movie in that sense. And how does Kitano do that? Well, first of all, he has that kind of languid tone, which means drawn out dialogue. People aren't very aggressive except for Kitano's character. That often gives us kind of funny moments where you have the kind of gangster wannabe in Kitano trying to, intimidate other country, kind of smaller, quieter folk. And then what Kitano also does is not only that slow kind of pace of dialogue that creates some funny moments, but also slower rhythms of editing. There's also oftentimes wide shots. We're very rarely kind of in close-ups. It's always the two of them together on screen, or it's a wide shot of the kind of slowness and the limitedness of kind of the country road trip area that they're on. It's not a bustling city, so it does feel very relaxing in that sense. And then, of course, the two leads. I think Kitano does a great job at taking his very stoic, gangster, Yakuza-like, tough guy performance and undercutting that at every time, because he is the kind of intense guy going up against these relaxed people, which has a lot of kind of funny moments. And then the kid in the movie is excellent as well. The main thing for kid actors, you always want to make sure that they're not annoying, and this guy's definitely not annoying. So they have a really good combination there together. There's a beautiful Joe Hisaishi score that is light and playful and helps us understand and feel good about the movie, adds that sense of this is a movie about play, a movie about no consequences, feels like the world stops, that you're not worried about anything, you're worried about this kind of one task. It feels kind of like a vacation. So it's an awesome road trip movie because I think it marries what Kitano does so well with that kind of languid tone combined with the genre. It reminds me of A Perfect World or Stand By Me, mostly shot during the day. Lots of kind of small, intimate human moments, which are the best parts. Of course, the kind of traditional phrase of the treasure was the friends you made along the way. But I do think that a road trip movie, you're not necessarily worried about the end goal. That's just a way to structure the movie, to tell us about these two characters and have them grow together and have funny moments and sweet moments, like so many great road trips can be. So when I wanted to cover this movie, and why I wanted to cover this movie, is because it's a classic example of a Hollywood type movie that was made in the Asian cinema industry from one of their kind of premier actor directors, in a director that's very talented, who also can act very well and knows how to make his kind of movie and has been doing it so many times that he knows how to make it the best way possible. It's a sweet, funny movie, and for me, another example that when it comes to Asian cinema, there is more than Kurosawa. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know if you've seen this movie, if you've seen any of the other movies from Beat Takashi, like Fireworks, or maybe you've seen him as an actor in something like Battle Royale, or the most recent Scarlett Johansson, Ghost in the Shell. Any of that stuff is great to hear. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.